So happy to welcome to the show the Morris Professor of History at the University of Houston. He's an author of multiple books. We are talking about Dr. Gerald Horne. Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Democratic National Convention week.
Well, same to you, I guess.
Everything is online. This is obviously a first. Do you think this is going to have, how do you see this changing the effectiveness of the convention?
Well, as you know, these conventions have basically been made for television spectacles in any case. The kind of business that's conducted at a convention can just as easily be conducted via a Zoom call, which will be taking place in profusion over the next few days. So I don't necessarily see a change with the convention going virtual. What may be the major problem going forward are the problems concerning the U.S. Postal Service, that is to say, the file by the 45th U.S. president to sabotage the U.S. Postal Service because he feels that in the middle of a pandemic, more people will be casting their ballots by mail. He feels that the lower the turnout, the stronger the possibility that he will prevail. And he also knows that if he is not reelected, chances are he'll probably be indicted. So he has quite an incentive to try to sabotage this election by any means necessary.
That's one strategy for staying out of jail. Just stay president. So, it is also going to be weird in that we'll have back-to-back conventions. Usually they're separated by several weeks or a month, and now it's going to be all politics all the time for the next couple of weeks.
Well, not only that, but Mr. Trump is suggesting that he will give his acceptance speech for the GOP nomination from the White House itself, which many ethicists have said raises serious and searching questions of whether or not that's actually appropriate, legal, or ethical.
Right. So he just got back I can't remember who, some White House ethicist said that, yes, he can do it. But to me, it just looks sleazy. Why would you do that? I'm going to use the White House as a prop for my campaign.
Well, as you know, the 45th U.S. president, he is not necessarily bound by convention. There are no guardrails as far as he's concerned. And even more troubling and tragic is that the 63 million strong Trump base seems to have no problem with it.
Yeah, well, they probably, I shouldn't say that. I doubt they know why it's a conflict of interest. You know what I mean? Like some folks that don't really follow politics might not be familiar with the fact that you can't sell stuff from the White House, not even yourself. So what are you looking out for? What's something that you're looking to see at this convention? I mean, certainly the biggest news was the selection of Senator Kamala Harris as Biden's running mate for vice president, first woman of color, first black woman, first Indian American. What are you looking for next? I don't know how he tops that.
Well, I don't think that will be topped, but I'm disappointed, although I understand the logic, that Republican John Kasich, the former governor of Ohio, will be addressing the convention. The Democrats seem to have this idea that they always have to reach out. The Republicans don't seem to have that idea, and people need to interrogate and understand why you have this dichotomy, why one party feels it has to reach across the aisle and the other party does not. It's also unfortunate that AOC, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is only given 1 minute to speak at the convention. Kasich will probably get a longer time than she does, which it seems to me illustrates part of the problem with the Democratic Party. One of their stalwarts gets 1 minute, and a Republican gets much longer time.
Yeah, I mean, not just one of their stalwarts, but the future of the party. I'm sorry. One of the things they're touting is that Kamala Harris is younger and represents a new generation of leadership, which is fine, but nobody represents a new generation of leadership more than the members of the squad.
Well, you are correct. And speaking of Kamala Harris, I think that all of us must reject the racist and sexist attacks on her, the revival of birtherism, this notion that's been floated that actually she is not legally authorized to run for president, even though she was born in Oakland, California, of all places.
Have you met Oakland? Oakland is one of the blackest cities in America. Oakland is still the chocolate city. Gentrification is trying, but Oakland is beating it down. I don't understand how people think you could be raised looking like Kamala Harris in Oakland and not be black. That doesn't even make sense.
Well, I think what the Republicans are banking on is a certain amount of ignorance and naivete on the part of a significant percentage of the electorate. And who is to say that they will be disappointed? In any case, speaking of disappointment, I was disappointed with how Congresswoman Karen Bass was treated during this whole process.
Yes.
I don't think that she was really being seriously considered. I thought that her name was floated in order to get leverage against Senator Harris. And then she was pressured to walk back positive statements she had made about Cuba, positive statements she had made about a late black communist, O'Neill Cannon. And that was, she was basically collateral damage. But I don't think we've seen the worst of it. I think you're going to be hearing quite a bit in the next 80 days about the former mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown, now 86 years old, who helped to propel Kamala Harris into politics. And it's going to be ugly and salacious going forward.
Well, I hope not. But you know what? I think Congresswoman Bass has been extremely classy through this whole thing. I understand they pressured her to walk her stuff back. My understanding is that she was under serious consideration, but whether she was or wasn't, it was pretty terrible the way they, chopped her up. But that's what they do to folks in national politics. I say Karen Bass for Speaker. That's the next stop as far as I'm concerned.
Well, sure. Especially, as you know, there's this scenario that there will be a deadlock in terms of the presidential election that could end up with a President Pelosi, believe it or not, by January 2021. And under that scenario, why not Karen Bass as Speaker?
Okay, but even if Biden wins, Nancy Pelosi is not going to be Speaker forever. I think, Karen Bass, Congresswoman Karen Bass. Yeah, I've known her a long time, so sometimes I accidentally call her Karen. But I think she would be a great speaker because she does know how to reach across the aisle and actually get stuff done.
Well, she's proven that in Sacramento, where she was a leader of the assembly, a leader of the legislature. And what's going to be interesting is if Biden wins, if you want to engage in speculation, who will take Senator Harris's spot in the U.S. Senate.
And that's up to Gavin Newsom, our governor. He gets to appoint someone, right?
He gets to appoint someone, and already people are... As a matter of fact, I heard that Dominique is throwing her hat into the ring. Confirm it or not.
Nope. Well, you know what? I think, though, that this is an area where we, and by we, I mean black people, should be pressuring the governor, at least a person of color. I feel like we should, we don't get black senators every day. So if you're going to replace a black senator who legit won, I need somebody black or at least Latino in that spot.
Well, Congresswoman Bass's name has been mentioned. Hilda Solis of the L.A. County Board of Supervisors has been mentioned. Alex Padilla, the Secretary of State in Sacramento, has been mentioned. And, of course, Congressman Adam Schiff has been mentioned as well, although I think, pardon the expression, that he's a dark horse right now.
Okay, well, you know what? I like Congressman Schiff. He's done an excellent job on the impeachment, et cetera, but I still think you don't swap out a black congresswoman for a white congressman. I'm sorry. I just don't think you do that.
Yeah, and I think that that'll be the logic that Gavin Newsom follows. Now, speaking of Gavin Newsom, I think that if Biden wins, his path to the White House, which is an open secret, effectively has been blocked because it's going to be very difficult for him to leapfrog over a Vice President Harris to get the pole position to run in 2024, 2028, or thereafter.
Yeah, well, plus the likelihood of getting another person from California is going to be small. I mean, she's the first on the top of the ticket since the 80s from California. And, you know, California, where they all like to come and get campaign money, but they like to clown us and take us for granted because we tend to go blue.
Well, that's true, and I don't see that ending anytime soon. But once again, let's not count our chickens before they're hatched. There's still a distinct possibility that the Oval Office will be reelected on the first Tuesday in November. And if that happens, needless to say, I would hope that it would lead to an agonizing reappraisal of everything we thought we knew about the United States of America. Because obviously somebody's been misleading us when they told us that this could not happen.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's a big, important point. And if we didn't learn that polls are not reliable after the last election, then, you know, we deserve what we get. Let's go to Willie calling us from Palmdale. Hi, Willie. Willie, you ready?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, go.
I was hearing that Donald Trump was going to announce his presidency at the Gettysburg battlefield.
Yeah, he had been talking about going to Gettysburg, but I think the latest is he's back to the White House. Do you have any thoughts on that, Dr. Horne, as far as him trying to, you know, use all these symbolic locations?
You know, his brother passed away Saturday.
Discussion about that as well, but that would be profane gesture on his part, which of course would be logical and consistent given his past record.
Yeah, Trump's brother did pass away over the weekend. That's right, he did. I don't know how close they were. I don't know, I don't know a lot about his brother. Do you, Dr. Horne?
Well, it's his younger brother. He was not as alienated from his older brother as their niece, Mary Trump, has been, as evidenced by her tell-all memoir, which is #1 bestseller as we speak. Apparently, they did have a falling out working in the family business, but they were able to patch it up. Apparently, the younger brother was not as motivated and as driven to be corrupt, I should say, as the older brother.
Interesting. Well, you know, we don't know what he was being treated for. For all we know, it could be coronavirus. But pretty low-profile guy to be a brother of a sitting president.
Well, what I read was that he had a fall, which is quite common amongst people in his age cohort. He was in his early 70s, and that led to bleeding on the brain, which is obviously very serious. And then that led to a complication that drove him into the grave.
Right. Well, when he filed that restraining order against Mary Trump, that was the first I even knew that Trump had another brother. I knew about, the one that died, but I didn't know about this guy. Let's go to Shayon calling us from Long Beach. Shayon, you're on with Dr. Gerald Horne. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Dr. Horne, good to speak to you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, since 45 has openly declared his intentional theft of the election by rigging the postal system with his hand-picked guy, I'm just wondering what are the Democrats in the Senate and the Democrats in the House of Representatives, what exactly are they going to do to prevent it? Are we going to have another situation where both election with George W. Bush? Are we going to have another repeat of the Supreme Court where the Supreme Court picks the president for us instead of the voters? Because I haven't, I see the Democrats come on TV, they make these little Millie Mouse speeches and like Bernie Sanders, and it's like, are they trying on marbles? What are you saying? What are you actually going to do? Nancy Pelosi, she's the leader of the House. She can actually take the funding away from the White House. All right? She don't have to fund the White House if she don't want to. She got the power of the purse. Congress does.
Well, I believe
stop
that
budget the White House. Hey, he can't fly Air Force One.
But that budget is already passed, isn't it? I mean, that wouldn't go into effect until next year's budget. They've already approved a budget, my understanding. But I understand what you're saying because, Shayon, I've been saying, why can't we sue? Why can't we sue? Why can't we do something more decisive? How do we push back against, this move on the post office, which is really, it's really undemocratic. I mean, it just seems, and it's so blatant. What should Democrats be doing, Dr. Horne?
Well, first of all, their options are limited because they don't control the Senate. And so if they try to push through a measure in the House, it goes over to the Senate and dies. Congresswoman Pelosi has called for the Postmaster General to come before Congress. I think that'll happen today, if not tomorrow. They'll try to put pressure on him through berating him at a congressional session. I understand the Democrats also are engaged in a massive harvesting of mail-in votes, or absentee votes, I should say, that a mechanism is in place to do that. A mechanism is in place to drive the elderly to the polls. And that's basically about all that they can do, because it's not as if they can act unilaterally without the Republicans seeking to play their usual obstructionist role.
Yeah, and we are seeing that states are talking about taking legal action against the president against the Postal Service, I guess, on this, because, but the U.S. Postal Service is a federal organization. So how would states be able to impact that?
Well, I think they would have standing because they're complaining about their role in the federal election, and that would give them, it seems, a legal hook. But once again, going into the courts is perilous because we know that the Trump regime has packed the courts with their supporters. I mean, let's start with Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh and work your way down. In fact, you might recall that Tammy Duckworth, the senator from Illinois, who was born overseas, one of the reasons she wasn't picked is because they felt that the Republicans would bring a lawsuit and then would throw the Biden-Duckworth ticket off the ballot, even though John McCain was born overseas, Ted Cruz was born overseas, George Romney, the father of Mitt Romney, when he was trying to run for president some decades ago, he was born overseas. So obviously there's a double standard in this country, and people need to ask themselves why.
Yeah, well, that is a great question. 5:42 in the morning. When we get back, I want to talk a little bit about Black August. And, of course, we'll continue taking your phone calls, 520-KJLH, 520-5554. Got a few other things on the list. Time to check in with Dr. Gerald Horne and you. It is the front page. We're broadcasting live from the KJLH 1-800-THE-LAW 2 studio. It is radio free, and it's 102.3 KJLH. Dr. Gerald Horne is with us. Dr. Horne, tell us about your new book. Time to pick up some safer at home reading, family.
Well, it's really like beach reading. It's entitled The Dawning of the Apocalypse, The Roots of Slavery, White Supremacy, Settler Colonialism, and Capitalism in the Long 16th Century. I'm sure it's available at Essalon and better bookstores everywhere, not to mention online.
Yeah, I think if we can get some reading in while we're driving less, that would be a good thing. Let's talk a little bit, you're an historian, talk a little bit about the history of Black August. What is it and what it's grown to be?
Well, it emerged, I think it's fair to say, from the prisoners' rights movement. It emerged from the experiences in Northern California prisons by George Jackson, a field marshal of the Black Panther Party. You may recall a little more than a half century ago was basically killed in prison by guards under very suspicious circumstances. And George Jackson was also an author. His books are still being consulted, Soledad Brother and Blood in My Eye. And what's happened is that people tended to notice that August was a date of paramount importance in terms of Pan-African history. After all, it was August 1791 that the Haitian Revolution was ignited. It was in August 1965 that the Watts Revolt in Los Angeles was ignited, which had tremendous impact on the surging of Black consciousness. It was in August 1831 that the Nat Turner slave revolt in Southampton, Virginia was instigated. You may recall the controversial film, The Birth of a Nation, by Hollywood's Nate Parker, that provided a cinematic portrait of that stirring event. And so August has become a time when we commemorate the passing of our heroes and sheroes, and we pledge to try to walk in their footsteps.
And some people, are fasting and doing, a reading regimen. I mean, people have turned this into, more than just an historical commemoration. It's become sort of I don't know if you would call it a holiday, some kind of personal journey.
I think it's a rededication. I think that people try to draw inspiration from the Watts Revolt, from Nat Turner, from the Haitian Revolution, from George Jackson, from his younger brother, Jonathan Jackson, and pledge and study and work and exercise so that they will be steeled to confront the challenges we know that are just around the corner.
Yeah, speaking of challenges just around the corner, some progressives and some ultra-Black nationalist thinkers are really not on board with Senator Kamala Harris. And I understand, differences in opinion, differences in agenda. Certainly she is, more conservative than I am in terms of her worldview. But I don't understand how we as Black people are sitting here attacking the first African-American woman to be nominated for the position of vice president, who is, she's not Bernie Sanders, but she's not exactly a conservative. I mean, and certainly her positions have evolved on most of the issues that people are critical of her about, which is true for almost the entire country. If you look at the way opinions are changing about Black Lives Matter, about gay marriage, and any number of other issues, the whole entire country has moved to the left. Why wouldn't Senator Harris move to the left? And why is it okay to attack this woman who's already under attack by the right?
Well, first of all, you may recall that in 1952, Los Angeles' own Charlotta Bass, who was the editor and publisher of the California Eagle, was nominated on a third-party ticket as vice president. Interestingly enough, the presidential candidate on that ticket was Vincent Hallinan, and Senator Harris, in her first run for office, defeated his son to become district attorney in San Francisco. But in any case, I think that we have a difficult task ahead. Number one, we must rebut these scurrilous attacks, birtherism, racism, sexism against Senator Harris. But I think that we know that the right wing will be attacking on that scurrilous level and also on the level of policy. And if there's no corresponding critique from the left, the tendency for politicians has been to where the attacks are coming from the right. And so I think that it's understandable why people will raise questions about her position on truancy, for example, raise questions about her labeling herself as top cop, for example. And then we need to understand as well that if you look at the experience of the late Congressman Ron Dellums of California, the predecessor of Barbara Lee, he was a radical in Congress. And what that illustrates is that as a legislator, it's easier to be progressive. When he became mayor of Oakland, he too was attacked from the left, because when you're in an executive position, be it district attorney, attorney general, you're getting constant fire from the right, and then politicians feel they must bow and bend to the right. And so I think that we may save ourselves.
Okay, I mean, I can follow the logic of that, but you do that during an election? I don't think so. I think this is circular firing squad. I really do. People need to stop that. And it really makes me want to cuss on the air when people, go into this, she's not black. That's some BS. Who put you in charge of deciding who's black? A. B. It demonstrates a complete lack of understanding about what the diaspora is. Oh, she's Jamaican, she's not black. How did black people get to Jamaica? The Pony Express? Come on, people. If you come from, Jamaica and you're a black man, you're an African, follow the bouncing ball. Bob Marley wrote that, 50 years ago or something? Are we really this ignorant about race and ethnicity and culture that we want to put her to the reverse paper bag test? It just infuriates me.
Well, I agree with you on that. I mean, I think any graduate of Howard University who pledged KKK and was born in Oakland.
Oakland! Have you met Oakland? Jeez.
I think that's a ridiculous accusation. It really doesn't. It hardly deserves a response, quite frankly.
Except that it's got a lot of traction in our community, people on Facebook, Instagram, and all those places. And the other thing is okay, so she's not the descendant of enslaved Africans. That's not the truth. There were enslaved Africans in Jamaica, while she's Indian. Yeah, okay, what are you mixed with? Go take a DNA test and let's talk about it.
Well, I mean, come on. Everybody knows, well, these people should know that when we were commodities, you could be an African-American from Florida one day and an Afro-Cuban the next day because you were sent back and forth across the Florida Strait. So I think that it's fair game to raise questions with regard to policy, but questions with regard to blackness, I think, is ludicrous and ridiculous.
Yeah, okay, so let's go back to the questions of policy. I don't agree with everything about Kamala Harris's policies in the past, but what she's presenting right now, and I, have reason to believe in that, then, it's way more in alignment with where I am. In other words, I feel like, is this the time to be blasting her and saying, oh, she's a cop, she's this, she's that? Let's elect her and stay in these streets and, pressure that Democratic ticket to the left. I mean, I keep saying, and if we would have been in these streets like this, imagine what President Obama could have done. We might have a public option in healthcare and banks. Had we been in the streets instead of sitting home complacent, expecting him to, magically fix everything as the first black president.
Well, I think it's fair for you to raise President Obama, because recall that he says that his biggest blunder was what happened in 2011 with the intervention in Libya. The pressure was coming from the right. Many of Mr. Obama's supporters did not want to put any pressure on him. They thought he was under enough pressure already. And so, therefore, that led, it seems to me, to the biggest blunder of his administration, whereas if there had been pressure from the left, perhaps he would have not gone in that direction.
Right. But if that, but that wasn't during the election. That was when he was already president. I don't see the point of piling on at this point. Okay, I know we are out of time. Okay, so you're going to have to come back. Darn it. What would you like to leave us with this morning, Dr. Gerald Horne?
Well, I mean, I think we need to keep the pressure on. I think people need to request their absentee ballots. Make sure you're registered, number one, because there's a process unfolding as we speak to deregister people, to throw them off the electoral rolls. And so you need to make sure that you're actually registered to vote.
Yep, especially in California because they are automatically sending that thing. So if it's the old address that you don't live at anymore, you won't get it. And everybody let's win-win. Support Dr. Gerald Horne and SO On Books. Pick up a copy of his new book. Thank you so much, Dr. Horne. It's always lots of fun to talk with you. I could talk with you all day long.
Me too.